Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Adult Type 1 Technology Virtual Discovery Day. Thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Sarah, and as well as being your host today, I'm also the Community Events Officer here at JDRF UK. Today, we will be piecing together trusted information about the broader topic of diabetes technologies, and we understand that the choice is overwhelming and that change is difficult. So we will be hearing from some incredible lived experience speakers today, as well as several healthcare professionals who are here to share their views on the different technology that is available and cover key topics. We'll also focus on exploring aspects of diabetes management that have progressed technologically to improve quality of life and help connect us better to our clinics. Additionally, we'll hear some updates from several tech companies. So any questions you may have can be answered by those companies directly from the Q&A function. We've got a very exciting lineup this morning and a big thank you to everyone joining us. So just to give you a little bit more insight on JDRF, we are the world's leading type 1 diabetes research charity. So since we were founded in 1970 by several parents of children with type 1 in the US, we've funded over £2 billion worth of research into type 1. Our mission is to improve lives today and tomorrow by accelerating life-changing breakthroughs to cure, prevent, and treat type 1 and its complications. The more excellent type 1 diabetes research we get funded, the quicker we can drive developments to cure, treat, and prevent type 1. We've invested $1 billion over the last 5 years into research. We have over 400 active studies taking place in 21 countries. And we have over 20 projects in the UK, as well as 19 ongoing clinical trials. So just a bit of housekeeping for the event today. In order to have the best quality experience whilst watching today's event, we advise you to keep the internet use to a minimum to help prevent any technical difficulties over Zoom. Second, in order to protect your identity, your camera and microphone is automatically turned off, so we can't see or hear you at all. Third, your chat host today will be my colleague Chris Bright, so feel free to use the chat feature to talk among yourselves and share your experiences of type 1 diabetes, as well as your feelings and experiences of the different techs. One of the best things about these virtual events, in my opinion, is how interactive they can be, so make sure you use that chat box section, get involved and get to know each other. Chris will also be dropping in some really useful resources into the chat throughout today's event, so keep an eye out for them as well. Additionally, if you have at any point got a question for any of our speakers or tech companies, then make sure you ask them through the Q&A feature. Just go to the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom screen and put the person's name or company in brackets and ask your question. You can see an example on the screen there in blue. We also have Carol as our Q&A host, who will keep an eye on this section to ensure that all your questions will be answered. So just want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors for this morning's event, who help us make events like this happen. So thank you to Abbott, Liquide, Dexcom, Insulet, Medtrum, and Medtronic. We have a very exciting agenda today. As you'll see, it's quite packed. So we have lots of amazing speakers. Just a couple of things to note, though, that our first comfort break will take place around 11 o'clock and our second one around 12, just to give you some time to grab refreshments. And then we will aim to finish up around 1 p.m, although the event will stay open until 1:30 if anyone wants to have a read through the chat box or the Q&A section. So it's my pleasure to introduce JDRF's Director of Policy and Communications, Hilary Nathan, who's our first speaker today and who will be discussing JDRF's inside story on the progression of diabetes technology.
Hello, everyone, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here and a really, really exciting time as we start to actually see the reality of hybrid closed loop coming into England and Wales. It's already in Scotland. We know we've got work to do with Northern Ireland, But really, this is one of the greatest medical breakthroughs in type 1 diabetes in terms of treatments since insulin was developed as a treatment 100 years ago. So we're incredibly proud and we're incredibly excited. And I thought it might be worth just going back in terms of the origins of the story of hybrid closed loop, how we've been involved, and then also what is our role working with the researchers, working with the clinicians like Alistair Lumb, who's on this call at the moment, and the medical technology companies in terms of how we get how we're going to get this over the line into the hands of patients. So Sarah's given a little bit of an overview. With JDRF, we fund research into prevention, treatment and cure to type 1 diabetes. And we're based in the USA. That's the mothership that administers a lot of the research grants, but we're also here in the UK, Australia, Canada, the Netherlands and Israel. And we were funded by, we were set up by a couple of mums who were sitting around a kitchen table in the early 1970s, desperate. Their children had just been diagnosed, desperate for new treatments, and they set up JDRF and in terms of the organisation that it is at the moment. And there's always been a very strong focus on cures. That's what we're really driving towards. But around in 1997, there was a young, very, very brilliant mind, a researcher in Cambridge called Dr. Roman Havorka, who's really led hybrid closed loop. And he was a mathematician and he was a bioengineer, but he was really interested in how mathematical modelling could actually predict how the body responds to insulin. He wasn't a doctor, and he wasn't a clinician, and he wasn't a biologist, in terms of a medical researcher. He was a mathematician and a bioengineer. So he started work around this idea of this algorithm, and this was really almost science fiction at that point. But his research was showing great promise. So JDRF, back in 2006, we had Dr. Aaron Kowalski, who is the chief executive of JDRF International today. And he was a young program manager, and he took Roman's work to JDRF's research board and said, there's something here, we've got to get onto this. And there was a little bit of, well, was this taking money away from the cure? But Aaron pushed and pushed, and he put his absolute neck on the line. And so JDRF started to fund it way back in 2006 internationally, but Roman very much leading the way. And we've now got this incredible body of evidence that actually shows that hybrid closed loop improves time in range, which reduces hypers, which reduces the risk of long-term complications, and also reduces the relentless burnout of the self-management in terms of the automatic insulin delivery. And what's also changed that's been really interesting is that the regulators, they're NICE in England and Wales, and they're called SIGN up in Scotland. A number of years ago, they were just really interested in the biological evidence of treatments, but they're broadening that out, really looking at quality of life. And so the experience of people with the condition has become much more fundamental to how treatments are approved. So for us, our role is A, to generate the evidence. So we funded Roman Havorka in terms of all of the evidence from children of babies of 1 year upwards, pregnant women, etc. Helen Murphy has done a lot of research into the effects of hybrid closed loop on pregnant women, showing actually women have got healthier, have healthier pregnancies and healthier babies as a result of hybrid closed loop. And then we as JDRF are named as a consultee by the regulator. So the regulator has to consult us in terms of what is our view on the efficacy and benefits of this treatment. And the regulator has a difficult job. It has to balance a number of things. So it has to, first of all, look at new treatments. Are they safe? Is the first criteria. Second, are they effective? Do they improve on existing treatments? And importantly, are they also cost effective? So the wonderful work that we funded with people like Roman Havorka and Sarah Murphy has actually shown, yes, it's safe, yes, it's effective, yes, it also reduces things like burnout, things like a better night's sleep. People are getting a better night's sleep. Parents are getting a better night's sleep as a result. And also they can show that actually there's a reduction in hospital admissions, things like DKA, things like the time that babies might be in neonatal care when mothers have got type 1 diabetes. And all this shows that this is a cost-effective, efficient and transformative treatment. So we have to give the evidence and also bring in the quality of life aspects. So all of that, we're a named we are a named consultee with NICE and SIGN, and then we have to also then work with the regulators in terms of case studies. So they want to know what happens as a population in terms of type 1 diabetes for people who would get access to this treatment, but they want to know the actual specifics of how it's life-changing. And so JDRF has got something called an Insight and Experience panel, and anybody can join it. And it's people who live with type 1 and who help us to inform our policy submissions. So we will take out a particular case study of somebody who wasn't using hybrid closed loop, who was on the trial, and all the different ways in which it was transformative. So not just biomedical, but the quality of life, the knock-on the family effects. So it's the person living with type 1, it's the parents living with type 1. It can also be a sibling that just also feels that, you know, the parents have to be so focused on one child and how the dynamics will actually work. So we pull these whole packages and profiles together of what the treatment means for the individual, and we submit that as well. Hybrid closed loop, it's been quite a long process. There was a initial kickoff to this health technology appraisal way back in 2020, and it's been 3 years in the actual process. And it's complicated because there has to be pricing agreements for the cost effectiveness, etc. And we've been incredibly lucky to have Professor Partha Carr and the clinicians, Dr. Alistair Lumb, people like Emma Wilmot, a lot of leading lights in the clinical community who've really pushed this forward. And I think one of my reflections is also how we've worked with community, with type 1, people living with type 1, to collect the evidence of why treatments are so needed to change, why it is such a relentless condition, and the appetite and the power of people living with type 1 has been absolutely fundamental to NICE acknowledging. They brought out draft recommendations in January saying their draft recommendations were to approve this, and we're just getting into the final stretch of NICE publishing their documents saying that this should be approved and available over a certain period and roll out on the NHS in England and Wales. So we're tremendously proud, but we know that there's work to do. We want to make sure that everybody has universal access to hybrid closed loop. And we also want to make sure that there's absolute equality between Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. England and Wales have a certain setup. Scotland has got a different setup, and Northern Ireland still needs a lot more lobbying and support in order to get these treatments, both CGM flash and pumps, and particularly hybrid closed loop, over the line. So We're not resting on our laurels. We know we've got a lot of work to do, but we can only do that with people living with type 1, making sure that our evidence is really spot on, not just from the scientific perspective, but from the actual quality of life perspective. And we can only do that with you. So it's a tremendously exciting time, and we've still got a lot more way to go. But I think we're incredibly proud here that the world is watching type 1 diabetes right now, and they're watching hybrid closed loop as the greatest treatment breakthrough since the discovery of insulin, and where the NICE regulations lead, where the type 1 community leads, where charities like JDRF leads, so the rest of the world watches. And we hope that what we are able to achieve here in Great Britain and hopefully Northern Ireland in the future, that the world will then copy us and that we will lead the way. I think the other super exciting thing is that as a result of where we are, the national media are really, really excited by this. And it's difficult getting type 1 diabetes in the national media. There's always so many other conditions that are always gaining the spotlight. But because hybrid closed loop is so innovative, because it is at the forefront of 21st century healthcare, a beautiful life-saving algorithm that saves lives, that transforms health, and ultimately it's actually a lot cheaper than a lot of the research and development that goes into traditional medicines and pills. And so the media is really interested, and they're waiting for this to be approved. So we both get the success of being able to roll this out, but we also get to raise awareness of what type 1 diabetes is, how relentless it is, and what the opportunities are in this research treatment, so that people know what type 1 diabetes is, they know why it's relentless. We can break down some of that stigma and lack of understanding as a byproduct of actually also getting hybrid closed loop through the approval system. So we're busy at the moment, but we absolutely love working with everyone living with type 1 diabetes. And I think I'd just like to finish by saying it's a tremendous privilege and it's a tremendous pleasure for all of us staff working at JDRF to be able to get this over the line and to be able to work with people living with type 1. And we couldn't have done this without you. So every cake sale, every one walk, every marathon, every minute that has been put into training for a 5K, a 10K, a swimathon, all of that has contributed to this point where we are going to get hybrid closed loop over the line. So I just wanted to finish by saying an absolute heartfelt thank you to everyone. Sarah, I want to hand back to you. Is that good? Do you want me to carry on?
Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. Thank you. Just as a reminder, guys, please feel free to use the Q&A function to ask any speakers any questions you may have, and they'll do their best to answer you. We're now going to hear from Lesley Jordan, who is JDRF's Technology Access Lead, and Dr. Alistair Lumb, who is a consultant in diabetes and acute general medicine at Oxford University Hospitals, as well as the chair of the Diabetes Technology Network, or DTN UK. Welcome, Lesley and Alistair.
Thank you. Hi, Alistair.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for joining us this morning. Can you just start off by telling us what is the DTN and why should we be happy to hear from you?
Well, hopefully you'll be happy to hear from me. So thank you for that kind introduction. So I'm DTN chair. So DTN stands for Diabetes Technology Network. And it's essentially a group of clinicians. So it started off as quite a small group set up by Emma Wilmot. who's now in Derby and an associate professor in Nottingham as well. Really to share best practice in terms of insulin pump treatment. So we actually started off as the insulin pump network. But what we realized over time was it was really important that we could share more best practice in terms of what to do with insulin pump treatment more widely. And then we had better access to continuous glucose monitoring technologies as well. Initially, we were fighting for that access for people and supporting areas to try and achieve that access, and also supporting the excellent work that Pathikar was doing nationally. And so we're now the Diabetes Technology Network. So looking to improve access for people with diabetes to diabetes technologies that will help to improve their lives. And we probably do it by kind of three main ways. One is that we try and produce education. So that's education for healthcare professionals in the whole multidisciplinary team about sort of how to support people using diabetes technology and also help people get access to diabetes technology. Also, and some people may have seen the videos on our website. Videos which are aimed at both healthcare professionals and people with diabetes to, again, help to try and support sort of getting the most out of diabetes technology. We produce best practice guides, which are really aimed at the healthcare professionals, but anyone can, they're freely available, anyone can access them. And we also work sort of in the policy area, so trying to influence teams locally to help gain access to technology, and also with the on the national level. So supporting NHS England and as I said, the work that Path has done an awful lot of to help gain access as well. So hopefully that gives a bit of background to kind of who we are and why it might be worth it.
Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, so the title of this session this morning is The Big News, Hybrid Closed Loop Tech Appraisal. So perhaps we could start off by saying what the anticipated criteria will be when the tech appraisal is published.
Absolutely. So when we talk about tech appraisal, it's probably worth saying this is coming from NICE, as I think everyone knows. And the reason that it's important that it's a technology appraisal rather than guidance, and I know you know this very well, Lesley, is that carries different obligations to commissioners and providers in terms of making sure that people who meet criteria have access to the technology. So we don't know, we haven't got the final document, so I think it's really important to say that we don't have the final criteria. There's something that we'll talk about a bit later on, which is normally something like this is expected to be implemented in 3 months. That's totally unrealistic for this, and we can talk about why. So it's going to be implemented over 5 years, and the document that gave us that idea about implementing over 5 years also gave an idea of what the criteria might be. And so we're probably thinking about 4 different criteria. So it's one of the criteria is children and young people with type 1 diabetes, so that's up to the age of 18. One is there's going to be some kind of HbA1c criterion, and we think it will be an HbA1c over, so that document suggested over 7.5% or 58 millimoles per mole in the new money. depending on what's familiar to you. Women who are pregnant, because I think Hilary referred to a lot of the amazing work done by Helen Murphy and Eleanor Scott in Leeds as well, looking at hybrid closed loop in pregnancy and showing the benefits there. So women who are pregnant or planning pregnancy is potentially one of the criteria. And then also, so this is likely to replace, there is actually a current technology appraisal for insulin pump therapy, which has been in place since 2008, excuse me. There's going to be some kind of criteria around hypoglycemia as well. Now that had a definition of disabling hypoglycemia, which I suspect they will pick up something similar in the new guidance. And I'm just finding on my screen so I can read it out to you. Disabling hypoglycemia is defined in that previous document, and I suspect they'll use a similar definition, as the repeated and unpredictable occurrence of hypoglycemia that results in persistent anxiety about recurrence and is associated with a significant adverse effect on quality of life. So there's likely to be criteria around hypoglycemia as well. So I think that's what we're anticipating. We won't know for sure until the document is actually published. So I think it's important to know that nothing I've said is set in stone, that's based on information that was in a kind of in a footnote in another document, and so it isn't absolutely set in stone, and I think it's really important that people are aware of that, but it's something like that we're anticipating.
Okay, thank you. So it seems that the clinical studies show that using hybrid closed loop is the best way to achieve the most time in range and the best HbA1c without the risk of increased hypos. So why isn't it just being offered to everybody?
It's a really good question. I think NICE make a judgment on the basis of cost effectiveness. So and the cost effectiveness modeling, they have to use or they sometimes develop sort of healthcare cost effectiveness models, or they have to use what's out there, and a lot of that is currently based around HbA1c. The modeling that's out there probably underestimates a little bit the costs of hypoglycemia, and it probably underestimates the costs associated with or cost benefit of the improved quality of life as well. But I think NICE go out of, they do listen, and I know in the process that they've undertaken, they have really listened to people with diabetes, and I've really tried to take it into account. So they are certainly not doubting the effectiveness, and what they need to do is find make a judgment about cost effectiveness. I think everyone, people are achieving targets, and I realize that that it sounds very glib for me to say this, but people are achieving targets already. I don't want to underestimate the effort that goes into that, but it's helping people to start off with. This is going to be about helping people to achieve targets who are struggling to do so and are unable to do so using what's available at the moment. And then over time, our anticipation is that this will become available to everyone. But I don't think that can happen immediately. We're in a cost limited system. It's taxpayer funded. There is a limited pot of money. and if this is funded, then something else needs not to be funded. So we do. I'm not saying that this shouldn't be funded. You know, it's my job to fight for this to be funded, and actually, it's other people's job to kind of stop other things not being funded. But I think it's recognizing that we're in that kind of cost limited system, and it's a cost effectiveness judgment that NICE make that includes effectiveness, and it absolutely takes it into account.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that begs the question, really, what about people who are achieving target already without hypoglycemia, but only by working very, very hard at it and taking, you know, numerous injections a day and using CGM or doing lots and lots of finger sticks? What about people like that? It seems so unfair to exclude somebody just because they are working so hard to achieve good results.
Yeah, I totally understand that. So I think there's a couple of things here. One is, I think we start with these criteria because I think that is I mean, they're still relatively broad, actually, and we can talk about numbers, but actually what we're looking at potentially, if we look at the HbA1c criteria, is that of a population in a recent National Diabetes Audit survey. So that was England and Wales, adults with type 1 diabetes, of a population of 227,435, around about 140,000 of those people will potentially meet these criteria. So they are inclusive in a lot of ways. Now that's only looking at the HbA1c criteria, so that will expand if you look at the other criteria as well. It does feel really unfair for those people who are working hard. I think so. There's a couple of things. One is there's a question mark: does the individual fit other criteria other than HbA1c? So the hypoglycemia criteria, for example, and the reason I read out the hypoglycemia criteria is actually they're about people's experience of hypoglycemia. So it's not about ticking numerical boxes, it's about people's experience of hypoglycemia. I think the other thing is these are the criteria that we're given and that we'll need to work with. There are other things that potentially we'll take into account, and that includes diabetes distress and the impact of diabetes on the individual. I think one of the things I would say is that actually part of the reason that some of the criteria are associated with HbA1c is actually often things like high diabetes associated distress are associated with higher HbA1c readings as well. So we're not, it's not excluding that idea, because those people often have higher HbA1cs. But I think, local clinicians, the decision that, you've got those broad criteria, we will be trying to help people gain access. But I think, the system can't fund it for everyone. Now, I think the other thing is we will work. There will be a lot of work in terms of tracking the impact, and the aim will be to demonstrate the effectiveness across the whole population so that we can gain access for the whole population. We start where we start, and I have to say, if we're looking at the adult population and we're anticipating that 140,000 people will meet the criteria, then actually that's pretty good. If we can get access for those 140,000 people. If you're not one of those, I totally understand your frustration. And I think honestly, I think it's being patient with the system, because I think eventually the aim is that we try and get this for everybody.
So in the context of being patient with the system, who goes first? And what about the people whose life is severely affected by something that hybrid closed loop could solve? How long will they have to wait?
So just again, to give some idea of numbers, the NICE technology appraisal has been in place for insulin pumps, has been in place for 15 years, and according to latest data for England and Wales, we probably have just over 26,000 people in England and Wales using insulin pumps. I'm not excluding Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's just this is where the data that we have comes from. In Northern Ireland, I sought data separately, and there are about 10,000 people with type 1, of whom about 1,600 are on insulin pumps, for example. So it's taken 15 years. So you can see that's, maybe just under 2,000 people a year. If we've got a 5-year implementation for 140,000 people, then it's going to, we're not going to be able to do it at the same rate. It's going to be a significant increase in the rate of switching people or getting people access onto these systems. So we're not, and we won't be able to put everyone on immediately. There is a 5-year time frame, and what we want to do, the aim is to get everybody who is eligible, and hopefully broaden the eligibility during the 5 years, but get everybody who is eligible onto the systems over 5 years. And we won't be able to get everybody on in the first year. It's unrealistic, unfortunately, to expect that to happen. I mean, even if half the people, so 70,000 people, want the systems, then that's 14,000 kind of people a year, every year over 5 years, and that's actually a significant step up from where we are at the moment. So we're going to have to try and choose, people, and it's going to be a process a bit like with COVID vaccination. So remember back to COVID vaccination, we tried to do it, try to identify those who will benefit the most, to get those onto the systems first. So that might be that, for example, people who are experiencing severe hypoglycemia, so that's hypos that are needing the help from another person, for example. Those people, we know those people are having, amongst the worst experience of their diabetes, and maybe those hypo episodes are high risk. People who are women who are pregnant or planning pregnancy, then those, there's obviously a time scale there. Children and young people, we're anticipating that all of those will be eligible, and therefore I think we're aiming to get children and young people onto the systems, and using the teams of diabetes teams for children and young people. And then what we see is complications associated with diabetes. The people who are at the highest risk are those with the highest HbA1cs, and so it's probably going to be starting with those with the highest HbA1cs, anticipating that it's not going to end there. And I think those are broad criteria, but I think also there is going to be an option of looking at the people in front of them, and we talked about, someone who maybe doesn't have a higher HbA1c but does have high diabetes distress. Those kind of, local teams will be able to make decisions, and will take those kind of, be taking those kind of things into account as well. I realise that this is going to be frustrating for people, because you know, I don't live with type 1 diabetes, but if it was me or a family member of mine, I would want it as soon as possible. And I think what we're having to ask people to do is understand that we can't do it for everyone immediately, and we will absolutely will. We want to get to everybody. We're desperate to get to everyone, and our you know, we will get to everyone, but it.
Sorry to jump in here, but we're out of time. There's one thing that if you could just quickly tell us where and how people can find out more, and then if you've got a few extra minutes after our session finishes, perhaps you could go into the Q&A and type out some answers to people. Not all of the questions in there are for this part of the morning, but there are some that would be really helpful if you could answer them.
Yeah, I will happily do that.
Thank you.
And do that. Sorry, what was the other question?
Yes, the other question was how can people find out more about the different systems that are available?
How can people find out more? So I think there's two things. One is at the moment there are 4 commercially available systems. So there's and go to the manufacturer's website. So there's the Medtronic 780G system with SmartGuard that links with the Guardian 4 sensor. There's the Cambridge system developed by Raymond Havorka, which the algorithm sits on an Android app, and that's compatible with the Dexcom G6 sensor, and also you can use the Freestyle Libre 3 with that, and it's compatible with the IPSA pump, so the Ipsamed pump and the Dana pump, and finally there's the Tandem system with Control IQ, which also communicates with the Dexcom G6 sensor, and the Control IQ algorithm is in the pump. So
and there's the Omnipod 5, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Omnipod 5, where the algorithm is in the pod, and also with the Dexcom G6 sensor at the moment. So yeah, so those so you can go to the manufacturer's websites. Very soon on the DTN website we will have videos which will summarize sort of some of the things you might want to take into account with choosing a system, about what hybrid closed loop is, how people might be able to optimize sort of getting onto closed loop, and then a little bit of information about the different systems. We don't have a specific video at the moment for Omnipod 5, but we're working on getting that sorted. That's just because it wasn't commercially available in the UK when that came out. So DTN website, manufacturers' websites. I know you have fantastic information on the JDRF website as well, and I think NHS England either have published or are about to publish a guide as well.
Okay, thanks ever so much. There are so many more questions that I wanted to ask you, but unfortunately we're out of time. So thank you. It has been so helpful. And
apologies for talking too much, but
thank you very
much. Thank you very much for having me. And I will now look at the Q&A and see if I can get some of those answers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lesley and Alistair. That was such a great conversation. We're now going to hear from our next speaker, Jo Summerton, to hear more about technology in diabetes paediatrics care. Thank you so much for being here, Jo. Over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me this morning to talk a little bit about our experience in Southampton and our children and young people who are currently using technology. I will try and touch on a little bit more of kind of what's happening nationally with paediatrics and hybrid closed loops, but this is more to do with our experience. Just a tiny bit about myself. I've been a paediatrician in Southampton for 21 years. So 21 years ago, we had just under 200 children and young people with diabetes who were all on twice daily mixed insulin. So my habit things changed. 21 years later, we've now got just under 300 children and young people in Southampton with type 1 diabetes. And I think we're entering the most exciting era, in my career at least, in the hybrid closed loops coming for all of our children and young people very, very shortly. So a little bit about our service and where we started. We started and I established our insulin pump service in 2009. At that point, there was quite strict criteria about the young people who would be going on to insulin pump therapy. We were only able to put 20 children and young people on insulin pump therapy at that time, and we were actually only using one system because it was new to us, and we wanted to make sure we all became experts together, and were able to comprehensively learn that system together. Move forward 2 years later, when we took part in our first national trial with insulin pump therapy in our children and young people, and that was a randomized controlled trial that came out of Cardiff at the time, where at diagnosis, young people were randomized to either stay on traditional treatment, so in Southampton that was MDI at diagnosis at the time, or start on a insulin pump. And at that point we brought in a second insulin pump because that's what the trial was using. So we were building our expertise in more systems. We then moved on to 2017, where it became extremely exciting, and lots of people have mentioned Raymond Havorka and his amazing work that he's carried out over the years. And we took part in the Cloud trial, which was looking at children and young people going on to hybrid closed loop systems at diagnosis and looking at the outcomes. And this was a really exciting times to be involved in this. We then moved on to a further Cambridge trial, Raymond's trial, looking at our established patient group and starting them on a hybrid closed loop system, looking at the outcomes. That was 6 to 19-year-olds, but unfortunately this was just for a 6-month period, and at which point that system was removed. And then here we are today. We've got 2020, hybrid closed loops became commercially available to children and young people right in the midst of COVID. So we started a number of our families onto hybrid closed loop therapy, but it was all virtual, so quite a different experience. And at the end of that year, we also took part in the NHS England closed loop pilot. And where we are now, we've got, as I said, just under 300 patients, children and young people with type 1 diabetes. 125 of those, so 42% or 43% of our caseload are currently on hybrid closed loops. That is all of the families who currently want one. We've got a small waiting list, but not a massive one. So we're very, very lucky that we've been able to have funding for the technology for one. We've been very fortunate in Southampton that as yet it's not ever been stopped. We've been able to have CGM, we've been able to have the insulin pumps that have been required. But what I find quite interesting is that we've got 43% of our children and young people on hybrid closed loops. It's nowhere near 100%, and that is what they're asking for. Some of these families aren't wanting hybrid closed loops as yet. I think going through the years with insulin pump therapy, we've been introduced into the challenges supporting young people and more importantly, choosing the right system for each individual and the families being involved in those decision making about which system is right for them, or is a system right for them. My role as a specialist nurse and working very, very closely with my key worker families, I just wanted to make sure I was also advocating for the young person themselves. So we know that clinical outcomes are going to be better, but is it right for somebody who doesn't want to be utilising a hybrid closed loop to be on one? So we had to really make sure that we were listening to the young person and that they weren't railroaded into a decision that wasn't theirs. I think what we've been aiming for is not to have decision regret once they've made a decision about their system, and also make sure that we're really utilising shared decision making. So this is just a tiny little slide just to kind of bring that to fruition. That on the left you won't be able to see the writing, but this was a wonderful written document of I think he's 12 at the time now actually, but he was about 9 when he wrote this, about all the reasons. I didn't ask him to do this, he just did it, which system he thought would be right for him and his values behind why that was important. which was absolutely lovely. Sorry, this is a bit of a, the text is quite small, but these are all the decisions that I've just documented that have come from our team, but also more importantly from our families. What needs to be thought about when choosing these different systems, and the values that are really important to think through. We're currently looking at this quite closely in Southampton. We've got a quality improvement project going on that's looking how we can establish a really interactive shared decision-making tool or aid to help our families make these decisions so it's right for them. It'll be interesting to hear your thoughts, guys. So just pop things into the chat about whether you think we could add to this list, because it's something that we're really looking closely at the moment, and we've got a pilot questionnaire going out for our families to add to this. So starting with personal values. You've heard about hybrid closed loops. You think they sound absolutely fantastic. We need to be taking into consideration kind of the attitudes that any individual has towards technology. You might have had your diabetes for years and years and years and years and actually never even thought about technology. Don't feel it's right for you because it's not for everyone. You're going to have a detached device. That's not right for all. What are your thoughts around that? With our children and young people, the independence factor. Young people who have been perhaps diagnosed at a really, really young age, their families have always been probably mostly in control of looking after that diabetes as the child is young, and as they're starting to go through the years, that independence is being handed over. Is this closed loop insulin pump going to help with that independence increase? Everybody's touched on fear of hypos today. Such an emotive topic, and really, really important to think about. Is this the reason that this young person, this parent, thinks that hybrid closed loop is going to be the best idea for them? Sleep. Parents awake hour after hour, day after day, month after month, year after year, and that young person, although from experience, from what families tell me, most of the kids are sleeping through their alarms overnight. So it is the parents who are up. So the sleep interruption could be a really important value for that family about why hybrid closed loops is probably the way to go, or what to think about. Alarm burden. Again, we know that their alarms are great. They tell us about actions that perhaps need to be taken if young people are hypo unaware or any other factors, but they're relentless. They keep you awake overnight. Is this going to be taken away by a hybrid closed loop system, or is it going to add to the burden? Also, this is around your thoughts, your how you manage your diabetes. Are you somebody who really likes to change settings, be really involved, analyze all the data? Or do you think it would be more sensible to choose a system that there isn't so many variables to tweak? So that is just the personal values. Alongside decreasing the number of insulin injections and hopefully totally minimizing it, decreasing the burden of type 1 diabetes. Are we thinking about the clinical outcomes and the long-term health benefits? So many things to think about. Moving on to slightly more practical topic, for our families at least, is the age and the licensing. So we've got great systems out there, but as you know, for the parents who are on this call today, they're not all licensed for all age groups. So the younger your young person is, probably the less amount of systems are available to you for that time in their life. The other thing to take into consideration where age is concerned is that if you've got a young person of 4, just pulling an age out, you are choosing a system currently that is going to take them through being 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the changes in physical and developments in that time can be quite huge, and it's really quite hard. And even as a young person themselves, choosing a system at 12 that's going to take you through to being 16, there's so many changes that are going to occur in that time. And thinking ahead, it is quite a difficult thing to do, but it's something that does have to be thought about. Moving on to the practicalities, and these are things that our families have get frustrated with. Is the CGM connectivity. If you struggle with CGM connectivity, there's obviously loads and loads of help and support from our colleagues at the companies, but this can be a real frustration. So is a hybrid closed loop going to be effective if there are so many connectivity problems? The size of the device, especially when you're putting an insulin pump, whichever system it is, against a tiny, tiny body. I remember, and it brought a lump to my throat. This is many years ago, because this little girl's about 10 now, but she was 13 months at diagnosis. And the parents knew that insulin pump therapy was absolutely the right thing for them as a family. And when that pump was popped onto the child, and we did the education package, the dad's eyes were so teary, because it was just seeing that quite large device on the body of a very small little girl. But not also the emotive side, that the wearing it. Where are you going to wear it? For our young people, it's all around outfits, or it's all around them not wanting to see others to see that they've got diabetes. Is it going to be a tubed pump? Is it going to be a patch pump? Are there any sensitivity issues with skin and adhesives, which we know we can get support with, but we do need to think about? We then think about having remote access to the hybrid closed loop systems. Will that work better than somebody who has to get a pump out and do the bolusing on the pump itself? For our young people, that's can be quite important, and also for parents of tiny little children, it is easier to remote bolus when they're running around the room than to get a pump out. So many things to think about. The other thing is around the number of devices that you might need to hold depending on the system that you choose. And that's been brought up quite a lot by our young people. Moving on to clinical evidence and shared experiences, we all know peer support and peer understanding of systems for those who are already using it is really, really important. Have you sought information from people who are already using the systems, rather than your healthcare professional team who can advise from their experience about working with people, but they are not wearing, or we are not wearing those day to day? Am I informed enough to actually make a decision about whether I want a hybrid closed loop? What is a hybrid closed loop? How does it work? Do I still need my basal insulin? Do I still need to bolus? I've heard there's an increased risk of DKA, and that's quite worrying. Moving on to the benefits versus risk, and with any system, anything that we do in life, we always think about the benefits and how they hopefully will outweigh the negatives, but do they? So a few little things. There is an increased risk of DKA, but also there's less injections. How are we going to balance that? What are our thoughts around that? Wearing a device all the time versus an increase in diabetes burden, then that's not for all. And you might be sitting here thinking, I'm not quite sure why that's even been put there, but that is something that's come back to us from some of our families. And then more ketone testing, just in case there's a pump failure, versus actually being able to sleep all night for the first time in years. And then looking at the kind of individual profiles of yourselves, which system would best to suit my current lifestyle? Am I really sporty? Are my routines really different day to day? Do I need a system that I can intervene with a little bit more, or can I choose a system because my routine isn't that varied that will just learn my patterns? And then technical aspects, phone compatibility. I think I've seen a few in the chat today. Some of these systems only work with Android, some only Apple, some both. So you have to think about that. Is it waterproof? Am I a windsurfer? Are the children always in the water? Just so many things to think about that we need to, as healthcare professionals, to support our families to think about. And these are just anecdotal bits of info that have come back from our families and over the years, which I don't know about you, but always makes me well up a little bit. I couldn't do without it now. I've got my life back. I can go on play dates without mom. I can go to brownies without mom. I can go to sleepovers without mom and dad. I'm no longer my child's pancreas. That was one of my moms who, from diagnosis, did not sleep very much at all, was tweaking day in, day out, and was talking a lot around her feeling that she was her child's pancreas. And as soon as that young person started on this hybrid closed loop, she was overwhelmingly exuberant that she didn't feel like she was the child's pancreas anymore. It still wasn't plain sailing, but she was sleeping for the first time. A few comments for young people: more confident when driving, less excursions in ups and downs of blood glucose, decreases in hypos. They don't go away, but they do decrease. And most importantly, a reduction in anxiety related to the diabetes or diabetes burden. Okie dokie. So a few little tips and tricks that my families have been telling me over the past 5 years since we started our families on it. Trust the system, but not too much that takes away the safety precautions. To get the best benefits, pre-bolusing 10 to 15 minutes before you eat. Turning off auto updates on your smartphones, because that causes a lot of upset when there are automatic updates, and then that has a real knock-on effect to whether you're going to be in a loop or not. Always announce exercise to the system. Always suspend your insulin if you're removing your pump, because the algorithm won't know if you don't, and it will continue working, which is going to have a knock-on impact when you put that pump back on. Always keep your sensor accurate and connected the best you possibly can. Change cannulas on schedule. Rotate your sites. Keep those cannula sites healthy. As fabulous as these systems are, if you've got lumpy sites, it's not going to work in the way it needs to. Always respond to alerts and alarms. They're there for a reason, and they're trying to tell you something, and we need to work with this system and optimize it the best we can. Kind of in line with that, recognize when you're out of loop. Why are you out of loop? What's happening, and how can I get back in as quickly as possible? Be patient at the beginning. It's very, very challenging not to intervene when you have been managing your diabetes intricately for the last however many years. On the other flip of the coin, it's not a magic wand, and there will be times when the burden returns. And if you are overwhelmed, step away, take a breather. There's nothing wrong with it. Go back to MDI for a few days, or just come into manual mode. As I said earlier, the variability does decrease. We do have to be aware of pump and cannula failures, and it's really important that ketone checking becomes part of you, so we're safe. And work alongside your diabetes team to optimize the system that you're using. We're here to help. You are the experts. We can help you review, analyze, and most importantly, guys, sleep and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Jo. Some really, really useful information and advice there that I'm sure will be very useful to many. We're now going to have a quick 2-minute presentation from Cher from Medtrum.
So I'm from Medtrum, and I'd like to just introduce you Medtrum's nano touch-based system, where size really does matter. Medtrum's system is more than just a patch pump. It's an insulin pump and CGM that can work together or independently. When together, you'll have the benefit of the predicted low glucose suspend function, which can help protect against hypos, especially giving peace of mind at night. The system can be controlled by a compatible smartphone, either Android or Apple. This gives greater freedom with no extra components to carry. The nano patch pump is small and discreet. The white part is we call the brains, and that holds the basal information. The grey part is the reservoir and is disposal, making it environmentally friendly as possible. The reservoir holds 200 units of insulin and can be used for 3 days. We also have a 300-unit pump, which is ideal for heavy insulin users who would not be suitable for a patch pump. The steel cannula reduces the risk of occlusions and blockages. It can be integrated with our CGM and is future-proofed and ready for our hybrid closed loop. Our CGM is also small and discreet, as you can see. It has a 14-day wear time and guaranteed for 10 days. It has a rechargeable transmitter and gives real-time readings without the need of finger pricking or calibrations. It can be standalone, as I said, or integrated into our patch pump. It is simple to use the bolus calculator with the Easy Patch app, being assured that the correct bolus is delivered every time. It has the option to use the normal, extended or combo functions, which will give the flexibility to give insulin in a way that suits you. It is as discreet as sending a text. With the Easy Follow app, real-time data can be shared with family and healthcare professionals with no limit on the number of followers. The personal diabetes manager is another option if you do not want to use your phone, and uses the bolus calculator in the same way as the Easy Patch app, and it's small and discreet. With Medtrum, you get 24-hour technical support, e-learning, training, videos, to name a few. And as I said, we are go into the hybrid closed loop is actually programmed in the pump. It's just a case of being put on. Feel free to look at our website, social media and platforms, and don't forget to request a free demo pump so you can see how small it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cher, for being here and for Medtrum's continued support always. Just a reminder, please pop your questions for Cher if you have any in the Q&A, and she'll get back to you. We're now going to hear from Shan from Medtronic. Welcome, Shan.
So just a couple of minutes to give you an overview of the 780G system. I could talk about this system for hours. Thankfully, not on this call. But what I will say is, do have a look on the website. It has all the information, patient videos. We also have a YouTube channel, Medtronic Diabetes, which has up-to-date patient testimonials. But just give you a quick overview. So 780G system has been on the market within the UK for probably about 2 years. The data that we see with this pump is on average around a 1.4% reduction in A1C within the first 6 months, an increase of around 27% time in range. And I heard a few people talking about challenges of managing glucose overnight. So with this system, the data shows a 30% increase in time in range overnight. So just to quickly cover some of the newer innovations. So we've recently launched the extended wear infusion set, which is a 7-day set with a 7-day reservoir. So alongside the G4 sensor, you would change the whole system once a week. So set, reservoir and sensor 52 times a year versus 100 odd if it's 2 to 3 days of a set change. I'm not going to go into SmartGuard in any amount of detail, but effectively that's the hybrid closed loop element of our system that does auto corrections every 5 minutes based on your sensor glucose readings. And just to give you a summary of some of the support services that we offer. So there are various smartphone apps that you can use to view your pump data, but also share your data with your clinical team, with caregivers. We have our Start Right, which is one-to-one support for the first 3 months, and also CareLink, which is the system you can upload your pump data.
Thank you so much, Shan, and thank you for Medtronic's continued support as always. We are now going to be joined by Caroline from Insulet. Welcome, Caroline.
So as Sarah said, I'm Caroline from Insulet, makers of Omnipod, and would like to talk to you about the Omnipod 5 hybrid closed loop system. If my screen will move on. It is the first tubeless automated insulin delivery system that integrates with the Dexcom G6 glucose sensor. So it is a hybrid closed loop system, so it can protect from both hypos and hyperglycemia. The pod receives information directly from the sensor every 5 minutes, and it looks 60 minutes into the future to decide whether to increase, decrease, or pause insulin every 5 minutes. It is an on-body connection, so it's the sensor and the pod that talk directly to each other. So it doesn't matter where your controller is most of the time. You just need the controller when you want to deliver a remote bolus for some food. You can wear the pod anywhere that you would sensibly inject insulin. So that is great if you've got any absorption issues in certain areas, or you just want to wear it maybe in a more discreet area if you don't want to advertise that you're type 1. It also links directly to Gluco via a cloud. So that means that the Dexcom and the Omnipod 5 information is sent to Gluco roughly every hour throughout the day. So that eliminates the need to upload your pump in clinic, and it allows that better connection with your healthcare team. I'll just play you a quick video. If you'd like to download one of our simulator apps to see what it's like to use the Omnipod 5 controller, you can use the QR codes that are on the screen now. That is available on both Apple and Android, and it gives a really nice feel for what it's like to use the system. Hopefully I'll get them sent out with the presentation, or hopefully they'll be able to put links in the chat for you as well. There is also a pod experience kit that you can order. So you can order a free sample pod and feel what it's like to actually wear the system, feel what the pod feels like in different areas. And we've also got a team of Omnipod specialists that you can speak to on a one-to-one basis and ask any questions that you might have. We understand that choosing technology is a huge decision, and so that's why we've got lots of support available to help you make that choice. But also, you are not tied in for 4 years with Omnipod, so there's no contract. So if it turns out that it's not the right technology for you, you can stop using it. And it also means that you'd be able to upgrade to newer or more suitable technology as it becomes available. Final thing, we are doing our best to obviously reduce the impact on the environment. So we do have a disposal program, and all of the pods are produced via solar power as well. So if you've got any more questions, please do put them in the Q&A. And if you want to speak to an Omnipod specialist, please call our customer care line and select option 4.
Cool. So we're now going to move on to our next speaker. We've got Niki Breslin, who is here today to discuss her journey with type 1 diabetes as a parent and a key voice within the diabetes community. Thank you so much for joining us today, Niki. Over to you.
Hi. Okay, so I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in September 2001 after receiving a misdiagnosis in the May of that year. I was only just 20 at the time, and I can remember I received very little in the way of education after getting the correct diagnosis, and I don't think I even had an insulin pen when I left hospital for the first time, but I had a BG meter, and I can remember thinking that that was the bee's knees because I could do my own blood tests. And then about 15 years later, I was in a hospital clinic with other people with type 1 diabetes, and I spoke to someone else for the first time and realised that I felt like I'd been in the wilderness, and having a conversation with 4 other women living with type 1 diabetes too. It sort of found like I'd found civilization. In this room, some of those ladies beeped. And I got to see an insulin pump for the first time. Not just see it, but I saw it in use in real life. And until that point, I had believed that an insulin pump was a punishment for not meeting your HbA1c targets. And that, I think I'm probably not alone in having had that thought at some point. So I asked some more questions, and during the course of that day, it was really eye-opening, and I understood a bit more that, you know, there's more than just a BG meter available here. At the end of that course, my DSN told me about flash glucose monitors, and there was a trial across the hall. So I just wandered across the atrium, and I think I started the trial quite soon after that day. And that, I would say, is the day that diabetes tech really began changing my life. So the flash glucose trial for me showed that MDI wasn't meeting my diabetes needs. And having made friends with these other ladies, one in particular, who actually introduced me to my husband, helped me really understand the positive impact that the pump had on her life. And I started sort of seeing it as a tool in a management kit. You know, it's like having a drill when you need to go through a wall with something. And my eyes were so open that I realized my management kit needed an upgrade. So I talked to the DSNs, and I was perhaps a bit more assertive and proactive with this, and they were incredible at support. We tried various different things, but it all came down to perhaps moving to pump therapy would be the best option. And I started that in 2016. During this time, because the flash glucose monitor had made such a positive impact on me and my diabetes management, I'd been self-funding it. And so adding a pump into that, I think my mind blew a little bit, because that combination made me realize how much mental load I'd actually been carrying from a diabetes perspective. And at no point had I realized that in the sort of 15 years previously. Then in 2017, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, and suddenly this pump that had been so valuable to me became invaluable beyond measure. That and the flash glucose monitor meant that I could analyze my data, and I could react and make treatment decisions in a really informed way during a time when the stakes feel very, very high. I was fortunate enough that just in time for my daughter's birth, I was able to get flash funded by the NHS, and it saw me through the sudden drop in insulin requirements during her earliest days, and then helping me to titrate my insulin needs as my hormones leveled out again. The girlies will know what I mean here. I had some issues with hypo unawareness, which actually can be quite common in the postpartum phase. And I was fortunate my team supported me in continuing to have the flash glucose monitor funded. During my second pregnancy, COVID hit. The pump I was using was withdrawn from the market, and my team set me up virtually with a new pump, the Omnipod Dash. And I was then also approved for funded CGM. When the concept trial obviously was published. So much of this was supported virtually that I think at one point I felt like I was an IT expert. My son arrived just as restrictions started easing, but for us, the world was still very, very small, and the postnatal support from a diabetes perspective wasn't as accessible as I think I'd anticipated it would be. But my tech really empowered me again to be more assertive, to reach out, and I contacted my team on a few occasions, knowing that they could access my data. So they already had the information. I just needed to let them know that I wanted to talk about it. They could look at it and we could have a informed conversation. It just was also straightforward. But more than anything, the CGM and the alarms empowered me to be proactive. I still experience burnout, which I had with my daughter, and diabetes distress, which was masked as postnatal depression. But I can only imagine how differently I'd have managed that without the technology, and without the reduction in thought and burden that brings. This year, my third baby arrived, and tech not only meant that I could navigate pregnancy and parenthood safely with a bit more headspace, but I feel it played a really big role in helping me catch any issues that I needed support with towards the end of my pregnancy. Without details, perhaps might just have saved our lives. So now I can be a more present parent. My babies have a mama who isn't preoccupied by rubbish days with T1D. And I'm also a mama who's very excited at the prospect of reducing that burden further and seeing the difference that the growing choice and access to tech will make to parents like me and many, many other people, hopefully, as this gets rolled out. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Niki. That was really, really brilliant. And thank you for being so honest with us as well. We're now going to be joined by JDRF's Community Partnerships and Events Lead, international futsal player and founder of the diabetes football community, Chris Bright, who will be discussing the positives and challenges of tech within sport and the journey of the many from MDI to HCL. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Sarah. For me today, I wanted to highlight very early on my affiliations. So I'm connected to JDRF, as Sarah said, with my job role. I'm also the founder of the diabetes football community and an honorary fellow at the University of Worcester. And the reason that I wanted to highlight those is because today I wanted to talk on a very personal subject and really give a personal flavour of my choices around diabetes technology and what I see with the title of this slide as the move of the many. So that's why I wanted to highlight that, because I feel today I want to be able to demonstrate that fully. So where it begins, for me, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes aged 8, September the 6th, 1999. It's a day you kind of never forget. It's one that's etched in my memory and my family's memory, and one that I always will constantly look over and think about the day that it changed everything. But for me, there was always the first question which plays on my mind and is the one that really drove me out of a dark moment into something maybe more positive, or something that kept me going, was, can I still play football? And that's really been a mantra for my life with type 1 since. The sport was there before I was diagnosed, and it's been there ever since. So it's an important part of my life, which then influences, I think, as I'm going to discuss this, a lot of what my decisions and what's come next in terms of my journey with the condition. So I was diagnosed in a very similar way to so many people, with the classic signs, but definitely that fear of what was to come. And football was my shining light. I wanted to show this slide as it demonstrates what I've been through in 24 years of being diagnosed, and the different ways that I've managed it. So I started out on mixture insulin in 1999, and my life being very restricted, needing to eat at the same time every single day, needing to eat similar amounts of food every single day to try and tackle a condition which we didn't know an awful lot about, with finger prick testing, which again only gives you a moment in time, and for a kid, quite a jar in the life that I'd lived before, which was pretty carefree. And I can remember life before type 1 diabetes, and this was a big moment, and also at a time in my life when I was moving schools. I had gone just from the oldest in the school to now the youngest in the school within the first year of being diagnosed with type 1, and I think that certainly meant I was quieter, I was internalizing a lot, and I was certainly hiding type 1 because of the environment that I was surrounded by. And it's important to, you know, link that into what's come next for me around sport. So my diabetes story is varied, and the technologies and the devices that I've used to manage it have been very varied, from that mixture insulin through to MDI through to CGM. But equally, it's always been a constant that sport's been there, and my background in sport is very much aspiring footballer as a youngster, playing in those school teams, regional teams, county teams, professional football trials, never quite getting there through the door, but always aspiring to play at the best level I could, and ended up playing for university first teams, and then into where I am in my adult life of playing part-time football, earning some money to play the sport I enjoyed, and then moving on to a scene of international futsal and playing the small-sided version of football, five-a-side indoor, around Europe, whilst obviously taking type 1 diabetes along with me for the ride. So it's those two bits of really, I guess, my background of diabetes and my sporting story are intertwined, but also I see them quite separately as well. I managed type 1 to allow me to do this, and actually sport and football is the thing that comes first for me, and I work as best I can to make sure that type 1 doesn't influence the things that I enjoy or I love doing, in a way that it can do. I work quite hard at trying to maintain the things I enjoy doing. But because this is a focus around tech, I want to get into that, and I want to discuss what it means and why those choices have been there around insulin delivery systems. I could have had an insulin pump much earlier, for example, and I want to discuss some of those reasons why, and maybe why my background could have influenced some of those decisions, because this is about technology, it's about choice, and it's about access. So this was my view as a child growing up with type 1, with my condition, and what I was maybe finding difficult in embracing tech. I was in contact sport, football and futsal, obviously high levels of contact. I always thought that this technology could be damaged and, you know, might affect me, also may put me off in some ways by having something stuck to my body. That was my thinking at that time. Crucially, at the time I was diagnosed, 8, almost 9, and those first few years on mixture insulin, which, if people don't know, it's very easy to almost hide type 1 diabetes with mixture insulin, because I was injecting in the morning and I was injecting at night, and I didn't have to do anything else during the day. So when I went to school, people wouldn't really know what I had to deal with or what I was going through, because there was no injections that I needed to do. It was only just about eating dinner at the same time, or eating food at the same time, and having a snack during the day. So I was kind of able to hide it, which technology would have changed. So that was my first introduction to type 1, very hidden away almost from everything I was experiencing. So actually it made sense for me to continue in that way into those teenage years, where actually fitting in was more important, and I was self-conscious really about wearing technology or showcasing my condition. I didn't want to, you know, make myself stand out, and really an insulin pump in my late teens, early 20s, for me, it never really crossed my mind, because I had always been built in this way. So it never came into my psyche to think about technology at that moment in time. And when I look at this slide, and this is a couple of WhatsApp polls from the adult men's group at the diabetes football community, and the parents and carers group at the diabetes football community. And I can see that I'm not the only one in the way that I'd approached my condition. And I'm currently, you know, focusing in on MDI because that's what I've been managing with for a long time. That when I look at the adult men's group, the vast majority, kind of 70% of those that filled in this poll are still using pens. They haven't adopted, if you like, some of the more modern ways of managing. So pump and closed loop. You know, closed loop maybe not as easy to obviously access as we've discussed, and I'll touch on that as well in a minute. But when you then compare that to the parents and the carers group of, you know, children now varying in age from say 4 to 16, 17, their introduction or their way of managing type 1 diabetes is steeped in technology. And you can see that there's just a polar opposite almost in approach. And that's brilliant because I can imagine that's having huge positive outcomes, and we know it is in terms of the what people are achieving with type 1 diabetes in younger ages around HbA1c and control and time in range. But when you compare it to the adult population and what I've grown up with, and those that have maybe been living with it for 25, 30, 35 years and longer, as we know there are many people out there living with it for many years. And, you know, somebody we'll be talking to later has you know, gone a really long time with type 1 diabetes. It's a very different way of thinking maybe. And I've grown up in an environment, when I look at this specifically about diabetes and football, that is consistent and is similar to maybe other people's views on technology as well. So I can see how it happens. And I want to offer this as a potential view and a potential solution to that. But the environment we're surrounded by and the culture that we're surrounded by does impact the choices that I made. And I don't know whether I can't speak for everyone, but I can certainly speak for myself that I believe football culture and growing up in a environment which kind of, if we like, shuns weakness or has done in the past, going back to the 90s and 2000s, talking about something which sets you apart as different, is also a medical condition which lines you up as living with hidden disability. When you're looking to perform or play at the highest level in anything that you're trying to achieve in sport, having something which sets you back as living with a weakness or a hidden disability, it's not something you're going to want to share or signpost to. So for me, I always felt that I was trying to fit into football culture. It was the thing that I really enjoyed doing. It was my big interest. But to do that, I had to really hide a piece of me, which was type 1 diabetes, because I feared the judgment, maybe whether the coach would pick me or not because I was living with type 1 diabetes, and I might have had a hypo or a hyper if I spoke really publicly about it with the team, and they wouldn't understand that. So I was constantly in that cycle, and I was really keen to try and progress as high as I could. So in order to do that, what society was telling me to do and the influences around me in the environment was to kind of keep that hidden. So it really is a big influence. It's a really big positive on my life, football and sport and futsal, but equally it's massively influenced the choices that I've made about how I look after type 1 and also technology and the use of it. However, that all being said, I'm now on a hybrid closed loop, and this is why I wanted to talk about it today, and I wanted to discuss this because that what I've already discussed sounds like a really big stretch to get from there to where I am now. And there's obviously been a process of wearing CGM over the last 4 to 5 years, which has really impacted my view of technology. But also there's other things which have played into that. I want to say a massive thank you to the clinical team, which have allowed me to get onto what is Omnipod 5 and the hybrid closed loop. I'm in a privileged position. Obviously, as we've discussed, access is not equal at this moment in time for hybrid closed loop across the country. Not everybody can get hold of this. I was in a lucky position where my Dexcom was already funded by the NHS, and Omnipod was the slightly easier component to get hold of from my NHS team for me to then be able to be put onto a closed loop. So I'm really lucky, and a big shout out to the Worcestershire NHS team who've enabled that, because without it I wouldn't be doing this right now. But equally, it was a choice. And I'd never, ever worn an insulin pump before this moment. I'd never tried one on. I'd never tested one. The day I went into training for hybrid closed loop was the first day I'd ever put on an insulin pump. And this is, you know, an important thing that I want to get out, is that it is a choice, and it was a choice. But there was things that on this slide really pushed me towards that and why I was thinking it. I think the main thing is that everything I'd seen and read about closed loop technology was that it was a game changer, and it was unbelievable, and it was going to make life simpler. And I can definitely vouch for that in the short time that I've been on it. It is more time in range. It's less effort, and it's no tubes with Omnipod, which I was always concerned with around a fixed pump, and glucose levels overnight for me I was finding challenging. And also my age and where I was in life and sport, I felt this was the right time. I'm into my early 30s, I would say, and for sport, obviously that could be a time where, you know, maybe I'm not going to be looking at the highest level anymore. Therefore, I really want to focus in on what the future looks like. And also in my early 30s, I've stopped caring as much about what people may think or signposting or what I'm wearing. So there's a timing thing which came into it, but also equally the extremely positive aspects of wearing closed loop technology. So it's proved to be everything that I thought it would be, and a little bit more. But I think the key thing for me is that why I see this, and the title of my presentation around the move for the many, is for a long time I saw an insulin pump as just a comparative to a set of insulin pens. I just saw it was a different way of administering insulin, and ultimately the upside of going onto a pump was there were things in it, you know, you could set basals over a longer period of time, but actually the major downside for me was that I was wearing an extra thing of technology. So I just saw the fact that my levels were pretty good on MDI as a very comparative. I've still got to do things manually if I wear a pump. I've still got to do things manually if I'm using pens. So I didn't see enough of an upside for me to trade that in for an insulin pump. But actually, when I look at hybrid closed loop now, I think the upside is that amazing that I just see this being the move of the many in the future. Obviously, we're talking about access. That's going to take time, but people jumping from MDI to closed loop like I've done, I think this is potentially going to be a rather large part of what we see in the next few years. It's all of these things, all of these positives. My key observations here, moving from injections, was straightforward. The training was amazing from an Omnipod perspective. It made it very easy for me to understand a pump and closed loop all in one, a couple of hours. And moving from MDI, where it was for me years and years of learning and trial and error, that was a really important part. I probably underestimated discrete insulin delivery and having a pump and not having to reach for an injection in public, a plus that maybe I hadn't seen before. And then equally, all of those things I've mentioned about my nighttime glucose levels were improved. I've got more time in range for less effort. And I'd kind of learning very quickly from the community around how to approach sport and physical activity. And I was using a higher glucose level target and activity mode for kind of runs and training, with a higher glucose level target for tackling the adrenaline of game day rather than using activity mode. But you can ask some questions about that in the chat if you like. But yeah, I think, and these were the kinds of things I'd always learned about glucose levels and responses there. And this then relates into the tips that I've always said that I would have followed before on MDI. They still apply now on closed loop for me. I'm still thinking about these things. I'm still operating with this mindset, but equally I'm putting in kind of less carbs after a game. I'm still looking at having all of my glucose treatments around me that I need, my everything by the side of the pitch or the court ready. So it's there. It's kind of following some of this, but also understanding what the new techniques are with closed loop, and understanding it's different for me as it is to everyone else. And I want to come out with some of these tips in a minute as I bring in somebody else into this conversation around physical activity and applying tech within it. And this is a start of a conversation I want to be able to spread in sport and physical activity, that through my work with the diabetes football community, our peer support project, and through many others that I connect with in that space, seeing closed loop and seeing pumps as a really positive step forward in management, and hopefully sharing some of what I've talked about today with the community and wider than that through this virtual event is a really positive way to look at how we in the future move that group where we talked about on the poll there of mostly using MDI to more like how it looks on the kids or the parents and carers group, where it is a bit more of a split and about the personal choice from people rather than the access perspective or the views and maybe slightly outdated views that I'd had being altered and changed. The vehicles of support we offer at the diabetes football community, if anyone was thinking about getting involved in the future, very easy to find us there and to search them. But really just wanted to summarize it by saying, a big thank you to having the opportunity to share this today and to talk about this really important aspect of the move of the many, is how I term it, and what I think is coming. And hopefully we'll be seeing many more people being on that journey very, very soon. So hopefully it's been really useful to hear that. I will now want to introduce somebody else who's very integral, let's say, within our diabetes community, a leading voice, somebody who's also involved in the diabetes football community as well. So I don't want to steal too much of his thunder or his introduction. So if I can just bring in Dan Newman and allow Dan to introduce himself.
Thank you, Chris, for that great introduction, and just want to say thank you to JDRF as well for the invite today. And for just full disclosure, I am a paid ambassador for both Insulet, so Omnipod, and for Abbott as well. I'm just going to share my screen as I have a really short presentation, just give you a bit more background about me, and then Chris and I will be doing a Q&A after that. So this is just entitled running my own race with type 1 diabetes. Just a brief slide about me. So I've been living with type 1 for 27 years. And although I've been living with type 1 for 27 years, I wouldn't classify myself as an expert living with type 1 diabetes. I think in any other field, if you've been doing something for 27 years, you're probably considered an expert. But as many of us know, that type 1 always throws up anomalies, challenges day in, day out that we need to adapt to. And if you hadn't guessed by the picture, I am an Arsenal fan as well. So just in terms of living with type 1, I'll keep my diagnosis story really brief. I was diagnosed in the summer of it, going from year 5 to year 6. So some of what Chris said really resonated with me, of being the oldest in school to then going to being the youngest in school and not really wanting to talk about type 1 diabetes. And that's how it was for me during that period of time after that diagnosis. And I really struggled in my teenage years. I'd struggled to accept type 1 diabetes. I struggled with school. Life was just a real struggle during that whole period of time. And what I now know, looking back, during that period, is that I was living with diabetes distress and diabetes burnout. And I'd reached a point where I didn't want to test my levels, but I knew that if I take insulin, I'll stay alive and I'll be all right. And I can just go on how I feel. And that was my mindset for a number of years of not testing, but judging my levels by how I feel. And gradually, as I move on throughout my journey, things can obviously only get better. And diabetes technology has played a big part in my whole journey of living with type 1. For 19 of those 27 years, I was on MDI, so on injections. And for the past 8 and a bit years, I've been using an insulin pump. And Niki mentioned earlier that an insulin pump was almost sold to her as something that people who were bad diabetics had. And I received that message much during my teenage years. And an insulin pump for me was always something that I didn't want it just wasn't, because then I was bad, and I had internalized that message as well. But it had got to a point where I was struggling so much that I needed to move on to diabetes technology. And what also helped is that during that period of time, I was also working at JDRF, and so I was able to see colleagues who were using insulin pumps as well, and that started to change my perspective on technology, particularly around insulin pumps. And for the past 3 to 4 years, I've been using the Freestyle Libre system, and again, that has been really helpful for me when it comes to managing my levels as well. But although I've been through all of that, I do live with complications of type 1 diabetes. So I live with diabetic retinopathy. I've had laser treatment on different eyes and on both my eyes, and I've also had vitrectomy surgery as well. And in 2013, I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, and in 2018, I was very fortunate to have a kidney transplant. And the reason why I bring this up is that this is quite key to my diabetes journey, and technology has played a part in that as well, in terms of my management whilst living with these complications has been better because of the technology, and that's key there. And also I had to deal with the mental side of coming to terms that complications doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a failure when it comes to living with type 1. And I think it's easy to feel that way because many years you're told if you do this, then this happens. And that was a mental barrier and challenge that I had to overcome as well. But also the race does continue. And throughout my 20 to 27 years, for many of those years, apart from when I was in school and in recent years, I always had a fear around movement and exercise and what would happen if I go hypo, or what would happen if I go high, and what would happen. And the fear was so huge because it was just what would happen if. And when I was at school, there were lessons, so I needed to do that. And it was only after my transplant where I had reached a point where I said to myself, you actually need to start doing more around your physical health. And that didn't happen straight away. It took a number of years to get to that point as well. But the reason for it is because research had showed, and my consultants had said to me, that if you can do more physical activities, you do have a better chance of your kidney lasting longer. So that was always in the back of my mind. And this is where TDFC comes in. So I'd known about TDFC from the community and seen about TDFC, but part of me didn't want to go because I wasn't quite sure I'd be going on my own and how would it be. I think I interviewed Chris on my podcast and had a really good conversation, and that really prompted me to want to be more involved with TDFC. I think in late 2021, I went to the first match for the TDFC in London, and it was just walking into an environment where everyone got it and they understood type 1. And it was very comfortable because not everyone had perfect levels throughout the match, and people were managing their levels differently. And I had the fear of what would happen if. And TDFC has been very transformational for me when it comes to physical activity and giving me the courage to get more involved in other activities. And I'll go on to that next, but also just the community as a whole, that there's so much knowledge within there when it comes to technology, and people are sharing ideas and sharing information. And it's just a way for us all to learn together. And that comes on to my next point. So in the second picture, this is where earlier this year, I finished my first half marathon. So I've always wanted to get into running and do a 5K. But again, that fear of going hypo, how do I manage my diabetes during running? It was so big for me. But last year, I did my first park run, so a 5K, I walked it. Then gradually over time, I managed to run the park runs. And management of the diabetes when it came to technology has, again, tech has helped me so much when it comes to managing the levels and having alarms to know if I'm going to drop, if I'm going too high, and also when it comes to having the Omnipod and being able to use, say, temp basal rates to adjust the insulin that I'm taking on board throughout the activity as well. And running has been a different challenge to football, particularly where I'm running for longer distances. But I've moved away from that fear, and I've learned to embrace that challenge and to understand that there will be challenges when I do different types of running. And it's all about learning how my body responds. But the benefit of being physically active outweighs the fear that I have when it comes to managing my diabetes, both during that activity and after the activity is finished as well. So that's a brief bit about me. Thank you, and I'll hand back over to Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you probably a couple of questions, Dan, not too many, just based on time. But
yeah,
I was just going to say, what would you say is a way or a particular set of things that you might do to help you manage exercise and type 1 diabetes whilst you're out running or football? Do you have anything that really helps, or a routine or something like that guides you?
Yeah, so particularly when it comes to running, it's about how I, in the lead up to running, make sure that I wake up early enough to have breakfast at least a couple of hours before, so I'm not spiking as I'm running. But also I've got fuel on board as well. Make sure that I've got enough time where I can set my temp basal rate, particularly when it comes to running. And also with my levels as well, what I do is with my Libre, I turn off the high alarm and make sure I have my low alarm higher than I usually would on a normal day. Partly because if I have my high alarm on, I know I'll be constantly thinking, is it going to go off? Is it going to go off? But then I monitor my levels at different intervals when I'm running. And it's also being wary of how my body reacts after the run as well. So I'm much more sensitive to insulin after a run. And that's a key takeaway from being more physically active that I've realized, and as I wasn't before. So it's thinking, how am I going to react to this, and managing my doses after the activity. And sometimes it's a day or two afterwards as well. Always carrying enough hypo treatment with me. And yes, it's extra to carry, but it's something that we have to deal with and we have to think about as well.
Spot on. And last question before we hand over to Sarah is, what would your message be then to someone who's thinking about starting physical activity again, maybe after a break, or maybe never having been that physically active? What would your message be to them on how to approach things?
So my message would be, and again, for somebody who's not, I wouldn't classify myself as a sporty person, but it probably sounds cliche, but to do it, but make sure you do it at a pace and a level that you're comfortable with. Do your research. So if it's going to the JDRF website to finding out information about how to exercise, talking to other people in the community, find out what's going on, talking to your healthcare team, really make sure you have that information before you go and do the activity. Obviously, kind of standard, carry more than enough hypo treatment with you. If you have a hypo when you're doing the activity, that's okay. If it goes hypo when you're doing the activity, that's okay too. And you have to take it all as it's learning, because you're doing something new and stepping into the unknown. But take those learnings away, and the benefit of the physical activity outweighs any extra time that you have to spend with management. But just know that you can do it, and we all can do it. If I can do it, you can do it.
And I always like to put out there the analogy of seeing a mistake with your diabetes is like a bad pass. It's not something you would dwell on massively within football. You would just learn from it, play the pass in a different way the next time. And I think I always use that when I refer to the challenges that I might have faced in managing type 1 diabetes for exercise and physical activity, seeing those difficulties as a bad pass.
Definitely.
Right. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining us, and brilliant insight, a phenomenal story, journey that you've been on. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to hand back over to Sarah now.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for sharing and being honest and open with your experiences. It's really, really interesting and really beneficial for many, I'm sure. In just a few minutes, we're going to have another short break, but first we're going to hear from Gemma from Dexcom. Welcome, Gemma.
Hi everyone, just turning my camera on so you can put a name to a face. So I'm going to introduce a short video for you to watch about Dexcom's different CGM sensors. We're proud that our sensors are connected to the most different HCL options that are available on the NHS in the UK, and different apps and healthcare, different diabetes and healthcare apps. If you've got any particular questions, pop them in the Q&A. And yeah, here's the video.
Thank you, Gemma, and for Dexcom's continued support. Just to remind you to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We don't want any questions to get lost in the chat because there's lots of great engagement going on there. We are going to be joined now by Claire from Liquide. Welcome, Claire. Thank you.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. And hi to everybody. It's lovely to be here to be able to support another JDRF event. Let me just see, where's my... Excellent. So yes, I'm one of the account managers for Air Liquide, and we are the local distributors of the tandem T-Slim X2 insulin pump, and we're calling it the T-Slim going forward today. So just some of the key features. Well, one of the biggest key features that we have with the T-Slim is that it's a software updatable pump. So what we mean by that is that as and when new technologies are integrated and different features and benefits to kind of improve general treatment of diabetes, the pump can be software updated in the comfort of your own home. So you're always going to be up to date, never out of date. Some of the other features we've got at the moment, the T-Slim integrates as a CGM with the Dexcom G6 at this time. It's a rechargeable pump, so there's no need for carrying around extra batteries. It's a coloured touchscreen, as you can see indicated on the picture there, and it's quite a hardy piece of kit. It's an aluminium pump with a medical grade toughened glass on the front. It is a tethered pump, so there's a range of infusion sets that you can get, and it can hold up to 300 units of insulin. Our hybrid closed loop system is called Control IQ. And the way that it works is you need simply just the pump on its own and the Dexcom G6. There's no need for any other PDMs or software apps to make it work. They just talk directly to each other. And it works by increasing patients' time in range, and it does that by modulating the basal. And so increasing and decreasing basal depending on where your blood glucose is predicted to be in the next 30 minutes. So it's always working on a 30-minute prediction. and either decreasing your basal, stopping your basal insulin to stop that drop below 3.9, or increasing, maintaining what's programmed into your pump, or increasing your basal rate. And it also delivers what we call an automatic correction bolus to stop your blood glucose from going above 10. That's our website. That's also our QR code at the bottom there, which I would suggest whilst you're looking into the different technologies, because that's our I just completely lost the name of it. Our simulator app. Sorry, it's a QR code for our simulator app, which actually mimics the functionality of the pump in its entirety. And there are different social channels and our website. So I would suggest you have a look at those. And my time is up. 2 minutes goes quick. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. That was great. Just a reminder, if you have any questions for Claire, please drop them in the Q&A and she'll get back to you. We're now going to be joined by Jack from Abbott. Thank you, Jack.
Hello, everybody. It's fantastic to be here today and seeing so many amazing conversations about the future of technology. From an Abbott perspective, we believe that diabetes, you should be able to enjoy your life with diabetes, and we're focused on making breakthrough technology accessible to everybody and allowing healthcare professionals to get the data they need to make better informed treatment decisions. So with that being said, from my perspective, there's a lovely video, and please feel free to use the Q&A to ask any questions about FreeStyle Libre.
Thank you very much, Jack. That was great. We are now going to be moving on to our next segment, where we will be joined by various speakers from a lived experience panel discussion perspective. So my colleague Chris will be hosting this discussion. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Sarah. And hopefully we can get those involved in the panel back up on the screen. But yeah, essentially, I'm going to be hosting now a lived experience panel where I will be posing a number of questions about technology to a number of people living with or impacted by type 1 diabetes. So I think we've now got everyone on screen or close to. Yeah, that looks like everyone. So we've heard from myself, Dan and Niki around introductions and who we are and what we get up to. It would be great if we could start with some introductions from Tanya first, followed by Lesley and then Jack, just briefly around how long you've had type 1 and how you manage it.
Cool, thanks, Chris. Hi, my name's Tanya. I'm 29 and I've had type 1 for nearly 3 years. I was diagnosed in January 2021, right in the middle of a lockdown, so that's a whole other story. That was fun. I'm currently using the Omnipod Dash insulin pump and the Dexcom G6, but I started the Omnipod in like May this year, so before that I was on MDI, and I've also used the Libre 2 in the past as well before I moved on to the Dexcom.
Lesley?
Hi, I'm Lesley Jordan. I've had type 1 for 55 years. I'm using hybrid closed loop, and I'll just throw in that I'm the technology access lead at JDRF.
And then Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack. So I've been type 1 diabetic for about 5 years now, and I use the FreeStyle Libre 2, and I'm on multiple daily injections. So I've been on the Libre 2 for about 3 years, but before that was using the finger pricks after diagnosis.
Well, Bob, thank you all for your introductions. Now I'm going to pose a few questions and I'll direct them straight to those people. So I'll use your name to reference a question. So then my first one, and sorry to pick on somebody straight away, but is why did you choose the insulin delivery system that you are using? So whether that's a pump, injection or closed loop. And I'm going to come to Niki for that one, as Niki hasn't yet spoken. Sorry, Niki, to pick on you for that.
So for me, it was less about it didn't feel so much like a choice, but more about informed decisions about what met the needs of me and my diabetes. In terms of what I'm using now, so Omnipod Dash and Dexcom G6, Omnipod tubeless. My first pump, just the tubes, I didn't suit me. It impacted me quite negatively from a mental health perspective. So Omnipod was really the way for me. And G6, that's really what was offered, I suppose. And looking into it, I was really happy with it, trying it, really happy with it. So I think hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. More a question, I guess, it's more access, isn't it? What you were able to get, some of the information and research that you were able to do to see what would help you. So that makes perfect sense.
I have to say that JDRF and Input were very pivotal in me being able to access tech. So I do have to doff my cap to Lesley there.
Yeah, we'll take the great feedback. Thank you, Niki. Dan, what about you? What was your choices and how did you come to them?
There's some similarities. Sorry, Niki. I feel like I'm just piggybacking off what you. But so I've been, as I said, been on the pump for 8 years. My first pump was a tube pump, and the reason why I chose that pump at the time is I was using the same glucose monitor system that the pump would have been. So I thought, okay, I know how it works. That'll be okay. But also the tubing really had an impact on me. And it was when you sleep, it's got to be somewhere. When you disconnect, go to the shower. And there's all this other stuff. So then when Omnipod became available, it was not having the tubes and the almost like freedom I felt as well. And it was a perfect solution from going from, say, MDI, so injections, to using a pump. So I put it on, it's there for 3 days. I don't have to think about anything else, and I just use the handset. So that's why I chose the pod, and I really enjoy using the Omnipod. And then with the Libre as well, I've always used the Libre. I've not had any issues with it. So in my mind, if it's not broken, don't try to fix it, and it's worked for me. So yeah, those are my tech. Why I've chosen the tech that I have.
Again, interesting insight. Thank you, Dan. And we're going to go over to Jack because he's going to offer, I would imagine, something slightly different as an MDI or a multiple daily injection user.
Yeah, so I haven't been diagnosed too long really, and still in the process of, I think it's an ongoing process of figuring it all out, to be honest. And I can't say I've really had sort of consultations or conversations of choice of delivery system at this stage. One reason because I've moved over the last couple of years, so trying to set things up again. But I think I've also not pushed for the conversations for pumps or things just yet, because I've not felt like, one, I've wanted to or needed to. I feel in the early stages, I craved control. And in the very early stages when everything was kind of out of control and trying to figure it out, I very much wanted to have that ability to have the control. And I feel like I have that with the multiple daily injections. I'm the one that's making the changes, and I'm the one that is almost more solely accountable for it. And I feel like, again, I think like you said, Dan, it's been working for me. So I'm happy with that. And it's not something that I'd want to be looking to kind of necessarily change so much in the near future. Maybe one day I'll be able to relinquish some control, but at the moment I'm quite happy with it.
Yeah, and thank you for the view and the insight there, Jack. I'm going to go over to Lesley now, who's got a different end of the spectrum, if you like, for a number of years with type 1. Lesley, so what are your views on that sort of question?
Well, I've been pumping for 21 years now. I started using a pump because despite rotating my sites after that many years of injecting, my injection sites were not reliable, and my glucose management was particularly poor, just because my my injection sites were stuffed up. So so I needed to go onto a pump then, and my journey towards hybrid closed loop has really gone from there. Whenever anything new came out, I would generally buy it for myself first, because I'm an early adopter. I like to try things out. So as soon as Libre was available, I started buying it. I self-funded Dexcom. I think I started on the G4, and it's gone from there really, and I'm now on hybrid closed loop. I have the complication of gastroenteritis, that's not a complication, gastroparesis. So that, together with the dodgy absorption from my infusion sites, means that I need all the help I can get. So moving from injections onto a pump meant that tiny amounts of insulin were going in, which kind of spared my sites a little bit, but they're still not as great as they would be if I was brand new to this. And I'm not going to tell people what actual tech I'm using, because I don't want it to be seen as JDRF endorsement, but I did have to change clinic a year and a half ago to get the particular set of kit that I'm now using.
Brilliant. Thank you for the insight, Lesley. It's always fascinating listening to the years of type 1 knowledge that you've got and experience. Tanya, anything else you would add to that? Sorry, I'm coming to you last.
That's all right. Yeah, I guess so I've only been diagnosed for 3 years nearly. And I was quite happy on injections as well. But one thing I did when I was first diagnosed was make myself a diabetes Instagram. And I think that, and connecting with people on there, I saw the range of different tech that people were using to manage their diabetes. And I think that's what made me aware of kind of what was out there. And from that, I was kind of like, well, I really want to try a pump because I want to know what's best for me. So I wanted to at least try it. And I asked for a couple of years and kept getting no, your control's too good. I've seen a lot of people saying that in the chat and stuff. And then my consultant changed, and then I had a new consultant who saw me and said, well, the only thing I think I can do for you to make things better is to offer you the pump. So I just got really lucky, to be honest, with seeing that new consultant. And yeah, then I got offered a choice of T-Slim and Omnipod. And for me, it was the tubeless thing in terms of picking the Omnipod. My diabetes nurse actually gave me a T-Slim device, and I just tried carrying it around for a few days. And I found I just left it everywhere. I was trying to figure out where to hold it when I went for a wee, and I just thought, no. So yeah, that's why I chose the Omnipod and why I wanted to get on a pump, and now I'm on it. It's definitely, I can go back to injections like I did recently, because I left my PDM in London on a night out, so that was convenient. So I can go back to injections and it doesn't bother me too much, but the pump really allows just more flexibility for me. And I just find myself in situations where I'm oh, if I didn't have the pump, this would be really annoying. So a couple of years ago, I went to Glastonbury and I was trying to inject while holding food in the middle of a crowd, and I was just like, oh, how am I going to do this? My boyfriend was there, like, holding people back, making me a little space. And this year when I went to Glastonbury, I had a burger in one hand and I was like bolusing while I walked in the other. So it just really like made such a big difference to times like that.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see the positives from that change in a kind of festival environment for sure. I'm going to go on to the next question. I'm going to come to you, Dan, first on this one. So what are your hopes and expectations for the future of type 1 treatments? There's kind of two in one there, Dan. There's kind of expectations and then there's hope. So what's your thoughts on that?
So my hopes, and probably this is a bit cliche, but my hope would be that everyone has access to the treatment that they feel suits their needs at that time of when it comes to living with type 1. So if it is you want a hybrid closed loop system, that's great. If you don't feel ready for that, but you want to do another form of treatment, then you have that as well. But for me, it would just be that everyone has what they need. And I think for those of us who have been living with type 1 for a long period of time, and I think it was highlighted in the slide you shared, Chris, with the two groups, and in the TDFC men's group, and the use of technology there, and the use of technology in, say, the younger population was much higher there. And it would be that hope for me as well. With those figures wouldn't be so separated, and they'll be much closer together. And maybe people have been living with it for a longer period of time. Whatever you've been told about technology, that can change, that mindset shifts as well. So that would be one of my hopes as well.
Well, yeah, I can echo much of what you said there, Dan. And Niki, same question to you. What are your thoughts around hopes and expectations for the future?
I think for me, I'm in that stage of life where I very much prioritize my kids, and I think about what can we put in place so that if their friends kind of experience diabetes, what would be good for them. And I think, yeah, I mean, to echo most people, it is access to the management tools, whether that's insulin or technology, that suits their needs best. But I think it's also about looking at those life stages and making sure that there's ongoing support for those, and that I think my biggest hope is that one day we live in a world where there doesn't have to be a priority order. I know how unrealistic that may seem, but I just think looking at equitable access for everyone is a necessity. And I think so, yeah, I'm going to leave it there. That's my biggest hope, that we don't have to have a priority order, that it isn't necessary. Yeah,
I think that would echo many of the thoughts of the community about one day it's about our choice rather than access, and that word of access maybe being one that we focus less on. Lesley, this is a big one for me to ask you as someone that's, over 50 years of experience with type 1. What your views and knowledge and experience on this? What are your thoughts?
If 55 years of type 1 has taught me anything, it's that this isn't as good as it gets. There's going to be something in the next, in 10 years' time, we'll be looking back on what we're looking at now, and the announcement, the upcoming announcement of hybrid closed loop, thinking, oh yeah, I remember that. But there'll be something new that we're waiting for an announcement or on, and there'll be priorities for that, unfortunately. And I expect that there will continue to be separation between people who really need something and people who are able to advocate for themselves and shout the loudest and get it first. So that is my rather cynical expectation. But my hope is that within 10 years, I won't need to do this job anymore, that access won't be an issue, that everybody can access whatever they need from their local clinic without having to go anywhere else, without having to write letters to explain why they qualify or, you know, whatever. That's just nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. People should be given whatever they need to manage their condition best. And I've also got a hope for the immunotherapy treatments. I think that is such an exciting area. And at the moment, although it won't come anywhere near people like me who've had type 1 for so long, I just think it's such an interesting area. And knowing that the autoimmunity is an ongoing process, if they can get to the point where they can say, okay, people who've had type 1 for 50 years need to take this particular drug in combination with this particular drug and at this particular amount, and then you'll dampen down your autoimmunity and, you know, be able to keep your remaining 2 islets functioning, then I think that would be really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely, Lesley. Just in the spirit of time I'm looking at, can I ask both Jack and Tanya to follow each other on this question and give a fairly brief answer if you can, but sort of what are your thoughts when it comes to how technology helps you with the things which are most important in your life? How would you sum up how technology supports you in maybe the things that you get up to every single day?
Yeah, so for me, I think a big thing for me is exercising and sport. So I do running, CrossFit, and having the Freestyle Libre for that has been pretty remarkable, really. So instead of having to carry almost like a backpack of things to go for a run, just having my phone, the Libre, and some jelly babies is a massive difference. I work as a physiotherapist as well, and so I work with a few netball teams, and being on court side, I've managed to link it and sort of do some of the hacks so I can get the readings on my smartwatch, and to have that there just adds that level of ease, rather than I'm normally on the sidelines gloved up in case there's any blood injuries, to then have to take my gloves off to check my blood sugars is quite tricky. So to have it all there just makes things so much easier, and from a professional point of view, just gives me that peace of mind so then I can give to the people that I need.
Brilliant. Tanya?
Yeah, I was going to say similar things, really. I'm also a runner. I ran the London Marathon this year. It's my first marathon, so that was fun. And yeah, the Dexcom has just made like such a difference. Even the Libre, when I was first diagnosed, I was given that straight away and I was back running. I did a half marathon within 2 months of my diagnosis, and there's no way I could have done that without being given the Libre straight away. But yeah, the Dexcom, I can get readings on my watch, so I know what's happening the whole time. I don't have to stop. I don't have to get anything out. I don't have to, like Jack said, take a load of stuff with me everywhere. So yeah, and it also really kind of reduces like the mental load of it. Like when I'm running, I don't have to keep thinking, oh, do I need to stop? Oh, do I need to check my blood sugar? Oh, I wonder what it's doing, because it's just there. I can just see it. So yeah, it's been really helpful, and particularly the Omnipod as well with running. I find that when I get back from a run, I need less insulin, but only for a few hours. So on injections, I would just be compensating with food instead, whereas on the Omnipod, I get back and I can just turn it down for a few hours and not have to just be eating when I don't really want to be eating. So yeah, that makes a big difference to me as well.
Brilliant. And then a last question to all of you, as brief as you can be with the answer. What would be your message to others who might be considering a change to the way that they manage their type 1 and using more technology to help them potentially? So I'll go to Lesley first.
Okay, I'll be really quick. speak to the type 1 community. There's always somebody who's had a similar experience to you, and it's great to get loads and loads of different points of view.
Brilliant. Dan?
I would just say do what's best for you, and yeah, echo what Lesley says. What might work for somebody might not work for you, but that's okay. Just do what works for you.
Brilliant. Niki?
As above, but go in with a conversation, feel empowered to put your reasoning across, and don't see it as a permission-based thing, because it's a lot more complex than that, and that will hopefully manage your expectations and any emotions connected to that.
That's it. Jack?
Yeah, I'd say be open and really educate yourself on what there is out there, and knowing that sometimes what you think might be best might not actually be best. And also I would really include your close family, because often they've got very similar concerns, and we won't always know what information they may want, or there's some of the stuff has got great functionality, but I know in particular there was some stuff that my wife wanted to know about and she didn't want to know about other things. So it's just thinking about the bigger picture and the wider support network you have as well.
And then the last word from Tanya.
Yeah, I would just echo everything really. I can definitely recommend getting on social media, making yourself a diabetes Instagram and seeing what everyone else uses and what everyone else does, and seeing how they live their lives with it. And if you think it's going to work for you, if you get the opportunity to, give it a go. And if it's not for you, you can always go back.
Brilliant. Well, I just want to say a massive thank you to you all for joining me on the panel. Amazing experiences, varied experiences, and hopefully it's been a really useful listen to our audience. So big thank you to you all. And yeah, brilliant that you've been able to join us today. So up next, we're going to be joined by Camille, or AKA Nerdabetic to the community. So I can see him smiling as I say AKA. So we're going to have a quick conversation now for the next few minutes between me and Camille. I'm going to ask him some questions. Camille's hopefully going to provide us some answers to those questions, and obviously a lot of insight from the world that he operates in. So Camille, just to introduce yourself then, I'm just thinking, is it worth letting everybody know, and those that don't know, what's Nerdabetic about? What is that, and to us and to the community?
Yeah, hi Chris. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks to the whole JDRF team for inviting me today. Yeah, so I'm Camille. I've been living with type 1 for 12 years. It's actually, that number feels scary to me, because it feels like I'm learning something new literally every single day. 12 years, and I've been involved in the kind of tech side of the community in the last kind of 6-7 years through various means, probably most noticeably through my YouTube channel, which is called Nerdabetic, that some people on the call might be familiar with. Most recently, I've been kind of really passionate about highlighting the mental health side of using diabetes technology through kind of an agenda that I like to call time and happiness, where I try to deliver that message in every single communication I get with any member of the community, to always think about their personal time and happiness, not just time and range, to consider mental health. So that's a 1-minute summary.
So you mentioned time and happiness there, Camille. Do you want to give a little bit more on that? And also really keen for you to tell everyone, what technology are you using?
Yeah, so tech-wise, I have tried most of the kind of solutions available out there. Currently, I'm using the Dexcom G7 continuous glucose monitor and Omnipod in a hybrid closed loop system. Beyond that, I think for me personally, the most important piece of tech that I use actually is Twitter and the entire community. I think that's a piece of tech that often gets missed. So G7 community and Omnipod, that's my kind of tech suite. In terms of time and happiness, I define it as time in range plus mental health equals time and happiness. So I think today's conversations have been so incredible in highlighting the why. It's so easy to focus on the new shine and update to a particular new piece of tech, whenever that's real-time data, a pump working with a CGM, but actually so often we forget the why part of the question, and whatever that why might be to you, something as significant and important as planning your family and considering having children and pregnancy, like we've heard in kind of Niki's story, or something less impressive like your football, Chris. Whatever that why is, important to think about it. I always people often ask me, what's the best piece of tech out there? And I would say that's actually the wrong question to ask. The real question everyone should ask themselves on the call is, why do you want tech in the first place? And that should set you on the right journey.
No, perfect. And
I'm kidding about your football, Chris, by the way. You are a great footballer.
No, I was going to say it's far less impressive than, Niki's story of the number of children that she's got whilst living with type 1 and how she's managed that. So definitely agree with you on that. And then I was going to ask you then, Camille, there's been a lot of conversation today about the word access. You're somebody so connected into our community. You lead on the conversation around technology an awful lot. What's your view of that word access, and how do we widen it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Let's be very clear about where we are in this. We have seen really disproportionate access to current technologies across the board, from CGMs, smart pens, pumps, hybrid closed loops, to usually better educated, more privileged members of the community across the board. And that's just not a case in the UK. That kind of is common across the wider worldwide community, because in some ways the diabetes community represents the wider social issues we face as society. It's just a micro version of the wider population. So all of those issues we face apply to us as well. I think since my kind of involvement in the community, I have seen colossal push forward thanks to kind of peer pressure and pure community pressure. People really voicing their opinions has driven so much policy. Wherever we're talking about Libre, postcode lottery, which feels like, we don't talk about it anymore really, because it really has been a successful frontier. JDRF has played a colossal part in that. Other charities have as well, but actually it was voice of thousands of people, saying this is not right. So I think as long as we continue to empower ourselves to fight for the right things, that quality should continue to increase.
Absolutely. So it's a lot about voice and community voice, championing and pushing things forward. And I've certainly seen that from both an individual outside of JDRF and working at JDRF now as well. So Camille, you've had an opportunity through your YouTube channel, through the amazing work you do in the community, to speak to some of the leading minds, CEOs of some of the largest technology companies that are creating diabetes tech across the globe. What's some of the insight that you're hearing or you're seeing from them about the next 18 months, 2 years? What are you thinking or getting excited about based on what you've heard from them?
Good question. I would say I have definitely noticed I like Lesley's point about her experience kind of living with type 1 for so long, about, there's always going to be something better. And in 10 years time, we'll look back at, what we had today. I think the key insight I would say is move towards kind of software. I think we slowly reaching the point of diminishing returns when it comes to the physical devices. You can't, it's very difficult to make CGMs smaller than the newest CGMs we've got. It's very difficult to make pumps smaller than they already are. Kind of, if you look at the backpack insulin pump that was first created, we've really come a long way, and I'm not sure just how much further we can go. So I think over the next 18 months, more and more improvements on the kind of software side, so getting more kind of app updates. Most of the companies you've seen today throughout the little 2-minute segments talked about software updates. So that's all about making the thing you already have in your pocket or on your body slightly better. So I see real acceleration of that as the whole kind of space moves to more focusing on the software.
And I'm going to ask you a very similar question to what I posed to the panel. What are your hopes for the future around diabetes technology or the way that we manage type 1 diabetes? What would you like to see?
So I think one, probably link in a few points that were made in the panel, which was phenomenal. Well done on kind of sharing that, Chris. I would say I would love to see more. I think everyone on this call is probably in a quite active kind of community within the diabetes, just because they engage in, they're part of the quote unquote online community. Most people on the call are probably very aware of the tech that's out there, the people who are driving it forward, organizations like JDRF. In the future, I would love to see more people who are unaware of our whole bubble join it. If proportionally 10-15% of people who are diagnosed on day one actually learned that you're not alone, I certainly would have had a much better diabetes journey. I had a massive diabetes burnout over the first few years, just because I felt like I was completely on my own. And I think if we could really encourage kind of more engagement in the wider community, I think that's something that would make a colossal difference. And when I say engagement, that actually doesn't mean posting about your diabetes on Instagram or posting it on YouTube. I think that probably represents a very small percentage of the overall, what I would call diabetes community. The vast majority of people just engage by actually watching and staying up to date without actually sharing their own experiences. And I think that sometimes gets missed a little bit. So I know on YouTube, for example, kind of my hometown, if you like, I see a slightly different diabetes community to the community we might experience on Twitter, actually, because those individuals are engaged on a different level. And so I think it's just ensuring that we enable everyone who is diagnosed to engage at whatever level they choose to.
Yeah, it's a great point about awareness, isn't it, of what's going on.
We do live in a bubble. We need to, like, the diabetes community is currently a reasonably small percentage of the wider diabetes population. So as long as we can get more people in, I think that would drive social change, the scale of which we can't comprehend.
Absolutely. I'll talk about it a lot in terms of where we are with the diabetes community as a subsection of the wider diabetes community. So yeah, absolutely great point. And then last couple of questions for you then, Camille. The first one, what's the sort of feature or bit of tip or trick that you might offer that not many people know about or are using within diabetes technology, which you'd love to see more people using?
Something I probably use most days, barcode scanning for anything you buy to carb count. So often you buy something that, eating something that you bought from a shop, just using that so you don't have to do any calculations. If you do choose to carb count, obviously everyone has their own management, so this is not healthcare advice, but there are many apps out there. MyFitnessPal One Drop, which enable you to just scan a product barcode at home and have carb count per portion, although that's no medical advice, so please speak to your healthcare provider.
No, but it is a very good community hack that I also sort of knew, but I sort of didn't know all at the same time. So it was a good reminder. So I'm going to take that one away with me later, Camille. Maybe start doing that again. And then my last question to you before we hand back over to Sarah to to close out the event, what would be your message today that you would want to pass on to the community around this topic of diabetes technology? What do you want to leave people with?
I think be empowered. Think about your time and happiness. I think that's probably what I would like to end on. Think about why are you considering using technology, and let you try to drive that conversation with your healthcare provider. Be very open about your personal plans and the goals you're trying to achieve. For hybrid closed loop or pumps, you're likely to use that for 4 years. Your life is probably going to be slightly different 4 years from today. So think about the long term, and if your tech costs you your mental health, it's probably not worth it. So think about your time and happiness.
Spot on. Great message to leave us with. And just to say a massive thank you, Camille, for joining us today, the insights that you provide, and obviously all of the work that you do in our community to help us stay informed and move the conversation forward. You've done a phenomenal job, and I know you've supported JDRF so well over the years. So a massive thank you from me and from JDRF for everything that you do for us and for the community as well. So yeah, just a big thank you. And I'm going to hand back over now to Sarah to finish off the event for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much to Camille as well. That was really insightful, and I love the analogy of the time and happiness. Love that. So also a massive thank you to Dan, Lesley, Niki, Jack and Tanya for the brilliant conversation before that as well. So useful, and I'm sure lots of people got lots from it. So I'm just going to finish off today's event with some last bits from JDRF, including our resources and our upcoming events and opportunities. So if you would like to find out more information on diabetes technology, we have lots of resources and useful information on our website and YouTube channel. Or if you would like a more tailored answer to your questions, we also offer a one-to-one service via our contact us form on our website, which could be especially useful in answering questions around access or dealing with a clinic that keeps putting you off. If you haven't already, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram to hear all about these upcoming opportunities. So first up, we have our Managing Your Wellbeing with Type 1 virtual event coming up on Saturday, the 20th of January. So just like this one, the event is completely free, so make sure you sign up if you are interested. After this, we have our first in-person Discovery Day of 2024 taking place in London in February. This is set to be a brilliant event filled with incredible speakers, so don't miss out and grab your free tickets using the QR code here. These links will also be dropped in the chat. Additionally, we now have the option to register your interest for future events taking place in 2024. Be the first to hear about our upcoming events as soon as they are confirmed. We also have lots of opportunities available for volunteering. So very soon we will be sharing a form called the Share Your Story form on our social media to find people who are connected to Type 1 to come along to our virtual and or our in-person Discovery Days to share your experiences or expertise in specific subjects. So if this is something that you might be interested in, keep an eye on our socials and let us know how much or how little you'd like to be involved. We really appreciate any support that you can give to us. As well as this, you are always welcome to come and volunteer at our Discovery Days or our fundraising events and just be a friendly face to attendees. So once again, you can find all of this information on our website if you are interested. We also have some upcoming fundraising opportunities taking place in 2024. So we've got the London Landmarks Half Marathon taking place on Sunday, the 7th of April, which will be on all the closed roads through central London, which is the only half marathon to go through both the City of London and the City of Westminster. We've also got the Brighton Marathon on the Sunday, the 7th of April, which is an iconic marathon taking runners through the city of Brighton and onto the seafront. And it's a great alternative for anyone who didn't get a place in the London Marathon. And then we also have our ultra marathons. You can check out all of these events on our website or email events@jdrf.org.uk for more information. You can also join us for a memorable evening of carols and special performances in the stunning surroundings of St. Paul's Cathedral. So you can buy your tickets through our website now, as well as Christmas cards if you are feeling very organised. And lastly, a huge thank you to our sponsors, our incredible speakers, my wonderful JDRF colleagues who have been supporting today, and to all of you who have turned up to watch. We hope it's been an event that you've enjoyed and taken some useful information from. We really, really appreciate you being here with us today. We are going to hold the webinar open until 1:30 to give everyone a chance to read anything they might have missed in the chat or the Q&A. And we'll be sending out a recording of this event through email, so keep an eye out for that. And please feel free to share that link far and wide if you have found this event useful. Finally, we would really appreciate your feedback through our evaluation form, so we know what you liked, what you didn't like, and any improvements that we can make to our future sessions. So if you have a couple of minutes now, please follow the link that will be dropped into the chat. Or if you would prefer to do this later, then we'll also be sending you a link in a few hours. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox. We really do appreciate your opinions and take on all of your feedback, so to make sure every event keeps improving. So thank you again for attending today. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we hope to see you again at our future Discovery Day events.